Hey guys, just a heads up, this is a not safe for work podcast, so keep it in your pants until you won't get busted.
Orgasmic Terrorist, a podcast about acceptance around becoming authentic within our sexual exploration. Orgasmic Terrorist.
Welcome to Orgasmic Terrorist. Jenna and Sarah's here.
Hi guys.
So this is going to be another departure from our normal show because I thought it would be interesting to introduce you guys to what Jenna and I have been working on.
Heck yeah, man. I'm super excited to talk about this stuff today. I think it's time that everybody knows all the ventures that we are currently working on.
Right? This year, Jenna and I had a conversation. Let me tell you the backstory. We started to work with individuals that have IDD, which are intellectual and developmental disability, with a company that I created. Jenna's been a wonderful help with. And in the process, she goes, Sarah, how are you going to address our sex podcast to the state if they were to find out and ask a question? I said, I've always wanted to teach our population with sex ed. And she's like, that would be so awesome. And with all this enthusiasm, it was amazing. And then all of a sudden I said, back in the day when I was working with another company, they had this program. I wonder if it's out there because COVID was happening during that time. And I Googled it and they did. And we put Jenna through it. From there, we grew this thing out of that. And that's what we'll want to talk about is all the different steps we went through and all the inspirations and this wonderful person that I'd love you to introduce that we met in the process.
Yeah, so we have Heather with us today, and Heather moved from Chi-Town to Oregon. And actually, when I was in one of those classes, a previous coworker of Heather's approached me and was like, hey, I have this really awesome person that moved out there. She's very into what you guys are doing, just looking to help her get some connections out there. She's brand new to Portland. And so I met with Heather and I was like, well, yeah, let's do this. And Sarah and I met Heather, and as turned out, not to be like a connection to help Heather get a job from anybody but us. So yeah, we hired her. I think you were what, Heather, like third day here? Third or fourth, something like
yeah,
that.
it was pretty early on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I thought I was meeting you guys just to make friends, honestly.
Yeah.
But like it worked out so well that it just naturally turned into that.
Yeah, I wanted to give a little, so let me pause that really quick. And before I have you talk about how amazing and fabulous you are, Heather immediately came on board with us and then immediately wrote in for a grant program to help Sarah and I realize these dreams that we have around sex ed curriculums for adults with IDD. And we actually won the money from that. And so we've been full steam ahead. But I want to give Heather a little minute to give us some background as to what she's done before and what we're doing now.
Yeah, I have always worked with folks with disabilities since I was a little kid, on and off. My dad used to do this cute thing where at the carnival, when the carnival would come around, they would need volunteers to ride the rides with folks with disabilities. They did it for the whole day beforehand. So I started doing that when I was like 8. And then I did some teaching and I did some ABA therapy when I was younger. Lots of interesting stuff. But I ended up going back to school to do public health, which got me into my job as a abuse preventionist, which is the colleague that Jenna virtually met with. And while I was doing abuse prevention, I learned how important comprehensive sex ed is in prevention of abuse, in particular for vulnerable populations, which would be folks that have disabilities, which would be folks that identify as LGBTQ2S+. I'm going to mess it up a bunch of times. It's a mouthful for me. But yeah, so I started doing some teaching of different groups, young people. I did some training for allyship, and I did that program that Jenna had gone through. I was teaching that to some folks at a day program in Illinois. They were really fun, and that was my first foray into teaching individuals with IDD about sex and relationships.
Nice. And off to the races we go.
Yeah, and then we're here.
And we get the benefit from her. Yay!
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right. We have a whole bunch of questions.
I'm going to ask the first question, Sarah, if you're cool with that.
Yes, please.
You just laid the groundwork for how we came about, but I'd like you to explain the program, the name, and what inspired you, the reasons why, because it's definitely more than you're very passionate about it. So I'd like you to see, can you tell us more about Boundaries and Beyond and what inspired you to create this program?
Well, besides the fact that you and I talk about sex all the time here on the
Yes.
podcast, my goal is always to help people grow with their sexuality. Literally, I just came back from vacation, and the whole time I was there, I talked to 6 or 7 people about sexuality and shared the podcast with them because I've always wanted people to grow. I grew. And the only way I grew was by learning about boundaries or learning about where my shame came from and things like that, right? When you were talking about the possibility of doing a program like this, the word boundaries kept coming up. So we were playing around with it. So then we turned around and put beyond because we don't want to stop at the boundaries. We want to grow it to also share the knowledge and then apply it. It's just not sharing, here's my boundary. How do I apply it? The goal is also to do a little prom or a practice session. And I think our newest conversation is that we're calling it Beyond Ball. Is that?
Yeah, I think so.
I love
That's
that.
what we ended on.
So besides teaching, we're going to also teach how to apply. And that just warms my heart. Coming together on this project has been amazing to me. There have been bumps, but there have been just a lot of growth. And I'm excited about what we're going to be talking about right now. That's my inspiration, was to teach more. And I know this population with my sons, everything ties back to my sons. One had a learning disability, one has an IDD, and sex was very important. We always had a conversation as a family, and we sat down. When my son first had sex, he made the announcement at a family picnic, which was amazing and stressful at the same time. But sexuality with my son and having him feel like that is part of that, he needs to honor that in his life, was very important to me in that particular one. And the other one was already 3 steps ahead of everybody anyways when it came to sex. And I was always hoping to teach him a little more tact versus that women aren't just projects or tools.
Well, and I think you've had a unique perspective too into how they've been abused. You've had experiences where people have taken advantage of them, and you've had to come in and literally save your kid several times from horrible things. And I say kid gently, he is an adult, but I think that probably has colored your drive and need for this type of service as well.
Yes, I agree. And I think the part that I love when we get into the conversation today, I think the pieces that you guys have come up and developed as well has helped me have hope that this is a good path. I've heard a lot of things out there lately that really disheartens me, like the movie Patrice. I know we talk about it every now and then. It's a great piece if you guys want to see somebody talk about it in a documentary. And one of the pieces she says in there, or they cover in there, is individuals with IDDs were never supposed to have what a neurotypical person has, per se, like relationships and a desire to have marriage or desire to have a relationship, whether sexually or not sexually, that they didn't get that opportunity, or it was never thought of that they should have that opportunity. And that hurts my heart greatly because they're human beings. They're sexual human beings. They just need to know how to work with their body and their brain. That's what's always been in my head. And then Patrice really did put a voice to it lately, and it really did help. And then what you guys are finding as well. And I would love for you guys to share some of it today.
Yeah, I think for me, I want to also say what inspired me with this program. And Heather's going to crack up because I cannot say this word, infantilized.
You said it perfectly.
Woo! I struggle so bad, and Heather and I have been having so many conversations with these massively educated people, and I'm like, I have to say this word, and I'm going to sound not great. And so they all laugh and giggle, and they all correct me, and I go, yeah, no, like I know, but my mouth doesn't go that way. I don't know what to tell you. So I think that the idea for me specifically, also being a sex educator in my coaching business for others, and it's just always been, my life has been so wrapped up in and around sex. We have this podcast and all these things, is that infantilized thing that happens to anybody that people deem as non-neurotypical. If we're speaking about, and maybe people don't understand what IDD means. So there's a spectrum, right? There's everything. There's autism, there's blindness, there's deafness, there's cognitive, there's physical. We're talking cerebral palsy or Down syndrome, or all of these populations are very much looked at from society as non-sexual individuals. We don't want to admit that they have feelings of any sort of sexual nature or romantic nature, because at large, the population is a mass of sheep that want to put their head down and just follow everybody off the cliff. But what that creates is that these individuals don't get health class like we got it in high school. They're not taught about what their bodies do, how their bodies work. They're not educated in any form or fashion. And then it just leads their parents or guardians into that same thing of, well, I'm not comfortable talking about sex in my daily life, so I'm sure not going to talk to them about this. And plus, what if something happens and then blah, 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 blah. So it's just all ostrich with the head in the sand. And it creates this massive suck of abilities for horrible freaking people that neurotypical people run into all the time to continue to perpetuate abuse. So trafficking, just if you are never told what is a normal sexual situation for a beginning, and you're in one of those vulnerable populations, and I'm the douchebag and I'm like, hey, I like to give anal and that's totally normal. They don't know. Nobody has this information to say no. Even neurotypical, and I hate that word, even neurotypical people, for those out there that need to have a divisive term, can't do these things in our own lives, right? Like Sarah, you and I have talked about it. How many times have we fucked through shit? Because we know it's the fastest way to get from out of that situation. Just
Right.
give in, just do whatever they say and get out of there, because it's a safety. We can't have boundaries. We don't do all these things. Well, then let's put this on another populace that don't have the same abilities that we have. It's such a massively needed safety thing. And so that is where, as much as I love educating the populace that we do normally on Orgasmic Terrorist, and it's titillating and it's funny, and we have glossary terms and we're giving platforms to people because sex and shame are completely tied up together, this is even more so for them. And I want to also make it clear that this is specifically inclusive of the LGBTQIAS2 plus population as well. So that's why I'm so excited. I feel like, Heather, I probably said a lot of the reasons you are too, but if you have anything extra you want to add in there.
Yeah, between you and Sarah, I echo both of those things. I saw firsthand as an abuse preventionist the abuse that both the LGBTQIA2S plus and the individuals in the disability community face. It is disproportionate. And when you layer those two things together, we call it intersectionality, layer those two things together, and now there's an even greater potential for abuse because they're vulnerable. And like Jenna had said, they don't receive sex ed. Folks with disabilities, especially intellectual or developmental, don't receive sex ed in high school. Not that a lot of people have received amazing sex ed in high school.
True.
But
I did the banana condom thing.
Yeah, mine was fine. Was it great? No, but it was like fine. It got the points across. Like, use condoms, STIs suck, here's how to prevent pregnancy. But they don't
called
even
them
get that.
STDs, or what was the other one? Oh man, sorry. There was that one word before STDs. VDs.
Oh,
We had
venereal.
VDs in school.
STD, now
Yeah.
STI. For everybody that doesn't understand or know those terms, that's where we're coming from. So VD is venereal disease. STDs is sexually transmitted diseases, and STIs are sexually transmitted infections.
Yeah, and they just use
Which is a new
STIs
term.
more frequently now, which
Yeah.
it makes more sense, like when you look into terminology and stuff. But they're all the same thing. We're all talking about the same things. But yeah, so they don't get that information. It's hard to adapt a sex ed curriculum to serve folks with IDD when that's not what your main goal is. Like those poor special ed teachers who like are already struggling, you can't ask them to then adapt a sex ed curriculum. So that's like part of the reason as well. I also agree with Jenna and Sarah that we have to really break the stigma that individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities aren't interested in having romantic or sexual relationships. Many of them are. Not all of them, but many of them are. And when we don't arm them with the tools to make informed choices about their sex and relationship life, we're setting them up for problems. We're setting them up to have unplanned pregnancies, to contract STIs, to involve themselves in risky or unhealthy behaviors because they simply don't know. You can't expect someone to care for themselves, protect themselves in all these ways if you've never given them that information. And I think one of the other things that I specifically had talked about a lot in my previous position is we make mistakes when we don't know how to do things appropriately. And there's a lot of folks who have been, I think, inappropriately labeled as sex offenders because they were not given the tools or the information of what is appropriate, what is acceptable in society. And I think on top of all the other things that they have to manage, now you've added this label of sex offender, and that's really heartbreaking.
Yeah, that one's a wild and hard thing for me to grasp as well. What do you mean? If they're never, ever taught about any of these things, also, we understand that there are cognitive or delays in that area. How are we prosecuting these people to the fullest when neurotypical people get off all the time? So it is. That's what for I think is our main goal for all of us is help, be of use, be of service, help them help themselves, I think is where we're going.
Absolutely.
See, I think let me add a little quick story. I had a client when I was with the company before that he had a record and he was 22 and he had a record for sexual abuse, but actually there was no contact. But the part that was really frustrating to me is like, did he understand what he was going through or what he was doing? And I worked with this guy and I couldn't believe it. I was like, he absolutely did not have any understanding of right and wrong around that area. And that always stuck with me. And that's when I was exposed to that class, which is what we registered Jenna for. Because of that, it hurt me to think about that this guy was so innocent of the crime per se. I think it was more exploration or learning about what's going on and didn't know the boundary, didn't know the right and wrong of it.
Yeah.
What makes our curriculum unique compared to other sex education programs available for IDDs, which is intellectual and developmental disabilities, and the LGBTQIA2S plus communities?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, so I taught one of the best ones I think that's currently available, and it still just wasn't enough. It didn't get in as deep as I wanted it to. I personally think there should have been more discussion about sexual orientation and gender identity, especially for this community. They are so amazing. They do not fit. They're a lot less likely to define themselves the way that society might. So they're much more willing to think outside of the box, if you will. So there's a lot of folks who identify as queer in some way, shape, or form in the community that we're serving. And it seemed like an oversight to not provide a lot more information about queer relationships. What are the different types of relationship structures? All these other types of things. What additional thought or what additional considerations around safer sex do we need to have? It just wasn't included. It also wasn't sex positive or pleasure focused.
Yeah.
Like it was more, don't get pregnant, don't get an STI, don't do these things in public, and here's how to not be abused. Not that those things aren't important. There's just so much more to sex, intimacy, and relationships than those things. And I personally think that we're just doing that community a disservice, not having all of that information out there. And yeah.
Really felt like to me, because I went through the same program that you did, that you were actually teaching, it just felt very bland. It felt very, let's give this community information, which again, it's a good program. It really is a good program. I don't think that it goes deep enough. If you just speak of the blandness that sex can be and not really put into any of these things that I think it's taken for granted that this population hasn't already thought about things, that doesn't consider all these other avenues, and it becomes overwhelming and insurmountable. And they're also taught that it's so shameful. Sex is not for you, even as we as women are taught sex is not for us, it's not for our pleasure. So I think that for me, it is more because I am the sex part of this education program. I can't tell you how many mononormative people that I coach in my Just Breathe business also don't understand these things. And if that's the case, then how much less is out there for these vulnerable populations? So for me, there was nothing about masturbation. There's nothing about sex toys. There's nothing about sex for pleasure for yourself. And that is such an imperative thing to know for people that feel isolated and lonely already, that already have such an insurmountable feeling of meeting other people to help fulfill these sexual or romantic or relational needs for them, like how much worse it is and how much more beneficial it would be to say, hey, you can do this for yourself. And we can keep this in this nice little safe box. And then it also opens up your understanding of where your pleasure comes from, what you're into. It feeds into those boundaries of, oh, I've tried this. I don't like this. So I don't have to do this with any other partner. So I think it's just, we wanted to take the wonderful, again, platform that was already out there and just go deeper. But also we have to deal with things like the state doesn't necessarily want to pay for services to teach people how to masturbate and all the things, because it's such what a subject it is. It is hard. And then we also have the parent guardian side that we have to battle, where it's, oh, well, my perception is that my adult child is only cognitively this age. And so they're never, ever gonna want to do these things. Well, okay. So if you have a daughter that is cognitively 4 and you never speak about any birds and bees, what are you going to say to a 4-year-old when she starts having her period? How are you going to explain to a 4-year-old that blood is now coming out of her body and she needs to attend to these things, and then now she can get pregnant? So you can't even talk to them about that. How are you going to talk to them about pregnancy? And just because you think that they're cognitively 4 does not mean that they are. It also does not mean that they're not growing and they do not have all the hormones and all the other messy shit that then leads them into these things. That is why it's important to me. That's what makes us different, is we are going into there. We are saying these things. We are asking the community at large, what do you want to talk about? And trust me, it's not the other program stuff. They all went through it and they all said, thank goodness for it. I in no way want anybody to take this as talking garbage about this other program. It was groundbreaking. I love it. We just now have that ability to go more. And trust me, everybody that is putting into this wants way more. And no one's talking about it. So we need to talk about it.
I just want to speak about the parents and support people who are like, oh, if we don't talk about it, it's not going to happen. Wrong. It's going to happen. Period. It's going to happen. Same thing with like when you think about a teenager, right? You don't talk to your teenager about sex, they're not going to have sex. Nope, they're going to have sex. They're just going to do it and they're not going to be informed. So
it's going to be not safe potentially.
Exactly. And that's where we end up in these risky behaviors, these not safe sex behaviors that turn into unhealthy things for them. Sorry. Go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, no, I appreciate your input on that, because honestly, yeah, I got educated in school. And I have to tell you, one of the books that I read in college was My Secret Garden by Nancy Friday. And I did a report in college. I remember standing up in front of people in my speech class and talking about sex, which, if you knew me back in college, I was a little mousy one. That saying the word sex, period, was not the thing I was going to say. And then I stood in front of everybody, got an A for saying it. However, I learned a lot from that book. And one of the things is that we approached our kids wrong. When I had my son, I never told him it was bad to touch himself. I don't know how many times I was told that as a child, or having anybody touch me down there was a bad thing. I actually told him there's a time and a place. My truck is not one of them. His bedroom was okay at a set time or after, but my truck was not it. I know I was different. I also knew that because of who I wanted to be and wasn't, I wanted to be open about my sexuality, but I was ashamed of it. All that stuff when I was young. I didn't want my son to be ashamed of it. So I actually made an effort to listen to my kids. And I hoped I helped him in his journey. And we talk about like times that he was targeted, but it was mainly because he was targeted on dating and the way our stupid world is when it comes to scams and stuff like that. It's like, I hate the fact that I have to even help him with that. I hate the fact that is an option, but that's part of this course too, is about that. In my opinion, is that we're including online dating and we're including all these extra things to be different. And I think that also helps in why I think this is unique, in my opinion. But what you guys said was perfect. All right. Why do you feel that inclusive sexual education is so important, particularly for the IDD community?
I think that Heather started to cover that, which is
Okay.
we're already not doing a good enough job for the community at large. And then to have another subset put in there that is also already challenging as a discussion for society at large right now, to have community members that literally, if you're not going to be talking about sex, how are you going to figure out your identity? And it's such a divisive topic in the United States right now, in the world right now. And it's terrifying for anybody, doesn't matter what cognitive or physical level that you have right now. It's a very terrifying thing. And I think it's just so important to include and talk about your sexuality and how you identify as, again, a safety issue, because you might not understand that you don't have to, if you can't say that you're bi, then you can't understand, or you have no words for it, or you have these feelings but nobody ever talks to you, how can you then be brave enough to then maybe go to both genders? Maybe society tells you, well, you're a girl and so you can only go after boys, but what if you have these big feelings for female? And I use female as all inclusive. It doesn't have to be a uterus developed female. So I just think education is power. The more information that we can provide any person, the better they are able to show up, give boundaries, keep themselves safe, and advocate for their needs. That is why I feel it is important to include that.
Yeah, of course, I agree. We wouldn't be doing this together if I didn't. I just think as a whole, everything we do, we should be more mindful and inclusive of various identities, including those with disabilities. We're a severely ableist society, and that has significant effects on people's quality of life, even their basic needs going unmet because of how ableist our communities are, our world is. And then we also have our folks that are LGBTQIA2S+, who do not, the stigma, the discrimination, the abuse that they have faced for ages and ages. We can't teach this curriculum without addressing those things. They're so intertwined, and we had someone say that in one of our focus groups, that we need to address internalized ableism because they can't be separated when we're talking about relationships and sexuality.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's super important in general to be inclusive of these communities, but especially in sex ed. And really, these folks deserve the same opportunities that anyone else would be afforded. And one of those things is having the knowledge and skills and tools to make informed choices about sex and relationships.
I really think that the term ableism isn't defined enough out there. Give us the usage of ableism in this context.
That's a big one. Where do I start? Essentially, just that society is not set up to meet the needs of individuals that have quote unquote disabilities. They would rather stick everybody your quote unquote normal, which is terrible, right? But that's what society says. So you need to be able to use the entrances that everybody else. You don't, sensory issues. There's just so many things that the structure of our society is not made for people with disabilities. And truly, it hasn't been made for queer folks either, right? Like they only recently are allowed to legally be married. It's inherent. It's the same as racism, but instead of race, it's disability.
Yeah. To give an example, individuals that need and get services from the state are literally, if they are in relationships, they are not allowed to live together. They are not allowed to do what so many of us just take for granted. They will lose their money, which makes zero sense. And it is a monetary thing. And it was something that has not been prorated well, has not been implemented well. Like truly, if you are an adult with any sort of IDD service and you get a fixed amount to help you live your life, if you were to then have a beautiful relationship that you should be allowed to have as a human being, it very much will potentially ruin their lives because they will lose services. So how can you do that? How can you say that two people that are receiving services cannot be living together when they're in a committed relationship, or they'll make too much money? And what they get now versus what they should get is thousands of dollars a month. And they simply will lose the little help that they have. And it's a repetitive creating cycle of abuse, unfortunately.
Yeah, structural systemic abuse.
Yeah, there's literally no way for any of these population members to dig out. Like a car dies, you can't get GoFundMes, you can't do all of these things that everybody else is entitled to.
Mm-hmm.
They are not entitled to because the state takes it as they are making additional monies and then no longer need services. How many of us have done a GoFundMe? I did a GoFundMe for my sister when she needed a kidney transplant and she worked full time. I work full time, but people in need actually can't because the state will look at it like, no, you're making money without us. It's wild.
I just think about all the things that, and truly, I think I technically would fit into the disability box because of my health things. But the state tells you if you're disabled enough to get resources. It's like, are you kidding me? You get to decide how disabled somebody is or not. And then all the privileges that I've had as a cis-het white lady in the middle class-ish world. How many boyfriends have I lived with? I got married. I wasn't worried, or I didn't have to think about all these other layers. Am I going to lose my benefits? Am I allowed to cohabitate with a partner without losing my minimal support that I'm receiving?
Yeah, it's gross. I hate it.
Wow. I'm so in love with this program, obviously. What are specific topics we cover that you feel are essential for the LGBTQIA2+ and the ID community?
Of course, we mentioned already sexual identity or sexual orientation and gender identity and different relationship structures as well, which we've heard a lot from focus group people. They're like, we didn't know you had other choices besides monogamy. Yeah, there's a bunch of other stuff. So we talk about those specifically. And one of the other things we've been hearing a lot that we're going to include is they really want some opportunities to explore and discover different kink genres, if you will, out there. There's a lot of interest and there's a lot of folks already involved in the kink community. So yeah, we're going to include those things. Of course, boundaries, right? That's in our name. It would be terrible if we didn't. A big one for me is also recognizing healthy and unhealthy relationship behaviors and structures. A lot of people, again, we talked about, don't know if they haven't seen this already somewhere in their parents or family or friends. TV certainly has not given them healthy relationships to model themselves on. So they need to know. We have heard, tell us what the red flags are. Absolutely, we're going to do that. Public and private is a very big one for individuals who have IDD. We need to be very explicit with those folks about what is acceptable, just like Sarah said with her son. The truck is not a place to touch yourself. However, your room is an acceptable place. And more than just touching yourself, right? There's other things. We have to go through what's cool, what's not cool, what's going to get you in big time trouble with the law. I had a younger man in one of my classes who wanted to share how he got arrested because he sent naked photos of himself to someone who didn't want them. And turned out that person actually was 16. So technically it was child abuse.
Yeah.
So these are really important things they need to know. What are the legal ages of consent? We need to talk about online dating and online relationships. There's a huge possibility for abuse in a variety of ways, not just trafficking in physical or psychological, but financial abuse is a big one. And that comes up, we pretend to be somebody's boyfriend or girlfriend. Hey, I need some money, etc. So financial abuse is a big one. And then the real basic stuff too, right? The STIs, the anatomy, the physiology. But we want to specifically touch on things like hormone therapy or hormone replacement therapy. What does it mean to medically transition? If you are a transgender individual, what are the differences in social transition, etc.? They're just not covered. And are Jenna and I going to be able to cover every single thing? No. But we're going to do our best. And if we don't know, we're going to point them to someone or someplace that's going to be able to support them.
And I think you just tied it back to what we were saying before, is you were saying that people want to act like they don't want these things. And if we haven't taught them the basics, right? And we already are getting so much kink request for information. Tell me they're not interested in sex again?
Yeah, right.
Tell me how this isn't a safety issue. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's, to me, it is such a necessity. If we have so many adults that are already requesting information for BDSM, for kink, for alternative relationships, for all these things, and they don't have just the modicum of understanding already or education about it, let's put these people in even more dangerous situations because they have no clue. So that is also why we're including these things.
Yep.
Everything that we're including in these that makes our program curriculum different is from the mouth of the people that we are serving.
Yeah.
And Heather and I and Sarah, luckily, are able to just really put our foots down and say, no, you're not going to tell us. Luckily, we don't have to adhere to these rules of they're going to come in, they're going to take out stuff from our curriculum. They're going to modify it. They're going to mute it. They're going to dismantle it. We actually are lucky enough to be able to do this whole thing the way that we want to do it. And that by saying we mean our community. It's community driven. It is community information. And that is what makes us different, is that we are able to then take the information that they're asking for and build that into our curriculum. And in whatever ways that looks like. There's questions about sex toys. Sex toys are very
Lots of questions about sex toys.
Lots of sex, yeah, lots of questions. Sex toys are for able-bodied people. So we have people that we've been talking to that specialize in making sex toys for limited ability people. And I think that is amazing. And again, another source of keeping them safe. So I think that's overall in general what I feel we're also adding to it. Sarah, do you think that there's anything additional that Heather and I didn't cover in that?
No, I think we covered it all. It's going to grow, even like some of the classes that you guys have been attending that are going to be incorporated in future. No, I love it. I love the fact that we're not just going to stop. That's what I think is my focus. That I want everybody to know, that just the start of this, that we're not going to just stop with, oh, here's 5 classes. See ya. We're here to be a resource and here to help grow.
Yeah,
so
continued education and continued support.
I just wanted to say that it's important to all of us that it's not just about the basics. It's that we want these folks to have fulfilling, happy, romantic and or sexual lives. And because they deserve that, and they are not getting the tools they need to navigate those things.
100%.
Yeah, that's so true. Wow. My heart swells. How do you approach teaching difficult or sensitive topics like sexual health, consent, and boundaries to a diverse audience with different abilities?
We're both skilled. We're skilled in different ways. I was going to say Jenna's particularly skilled when I was like, actually, no, I've already been doing this. So I guess I have some skills. But I think we're first of all, we're very trauma informed, the both of us. We know we're going to run into trauma on day one. With the very first day I taught that other program, I had 4 disclosures of abuse. We are going to be very trauma informed. We are going to give trigger warnings. We are going to develop a plan with our students before we even start talking about these things. Do, if you feel triggered, what are you going to do if you feel uncomfortable? We're going to have a plan because it's hard to think of something in the moment when you're feeling those feelings, and it's a coping corner. If you have any kids, we're going to have an adult-sized coping corner essentially. And we're going to adopt the program. Some people have talked about they want it online because they want to be in their own home, right? They're going to feel more comfortable with their sensory needs. So that's part of it. If you are overwhelmed by sensory things in your environment, you then are triggered by some trauma thing, you're not learning. You're not going to be able to retain that information. So that's part of it. Another part of it is everybody has different abilities and different needs. And we are going to find out and learn about those things prior to class so that Jenna and I can make modifications to support every individual in the class. We're going to do small class sizes because if we're going to be making these kind of modifications, we of course can't be doing it with 150 people. So we'll have small class sizes. We're going to provide essentially office hours so that they can speak to each of us. And our delivery of content is going to be kind of multimodal, I guess is the word I would say, because everything, we're going to say it verbally. We are going to provide some sort of written explanation. We are also going to have images and videos. Everybody learns a little differently, and each of these things is going to reinforce what we've already spoken or said out loud. And I know Jenna and I have been talking about this quite a bit lately. What about our folks that are non-speaking? And Jenna and I are very thoughtful about saying non-speaking versus non-verbal, because non-speaking folks just means they're not using their mouths, essentially, or mouth words, right? They're still speaking. They're just using a different device, if you will. For our online offerings, they can use the chat function if they'd like. We also intend on providing anybody who's using an ACC. It's essentially a device to communicate. They can be different depending on each person. Some of them will be just like, they might point at a picture on a board. Some of them might be very simple, like one word things. Others might be fully typing what you want to say. And a lot of them are pre-programmable. So if you haven't already used this vocabulary, it's not going to be in there. So we're going to provide them different terms that they might want to use and put into their ACC devices ahead of time so that they can participate fully. So they're not like, well, I don't have that word in my device, so I guess I can't participate in this discussion. Yeah. And sensory adaptations where possible, of course, for in-person stuff.
Wow. That's awesome. That I'm really excited about. We've had some wonderful group meetings, and to hear that part coming out just tickles me.
I think it's the consideration that we are attempting to provide is just, I remember going through high school let's just kick it down to my kid. My kid went through high school and it was awful. He is 24, and every time it is back to school and I see all those commercials, I am triggered still. Because it was such a tough time. He had an IEP for independent education program, which a lot of kids do. And what we're finding is that not everybody learns the same way, right? My son had to sit next to the teacher because he couldn't stop fidgeting and all the things, and it kept him easier to be engaged in the conversation than have him sit further back where he's going to be class clown and all the stuff. So we make these considerations in our lives for literally everybody else, but it's very important in this community to listen, and they tell us how to teach them. And so we are considerate of those things. And they are teaching Heather and I very much right now in the focus groups that we're running that, oh, we didn't think about this. Oh, we didn't think about this. Oh, we didn't think about that. Well, why didn't we think about that, Heather? Because it doesn't affect us in our daily lives. That's the privilege that we have. And I'm not saying white privilege. I'm saying as an able-bodied, whatever person, which I don't even like that. I don't even like the word disability. I think it's differing abilities is what it should be. But that's me. I digress. But there's a lot of consideration to be given, like the non-word speaking individuals, like people that can't see, people that can't hear, people that have different levels of those things, people that are sensory sensitive, and how to deal with the input coming in. All it is really, truly being empathetic. You show up where they're at, you listen to what they need, you give them or offer them support in that way. And then what a wonderful way to do these things when you are supported and given attention and understanding in the ways that resonate with you. The input of your learning abilities is massively more than me talking at you. It'd be like if Heather was hearing impaired and here I am on this just talking and no captions, no closed captions for her. Is she going to get any of that? Maybe she could hear a little. Maybe she can't hear it all. So it's considerations like that for all of us that I feel are what is different as well. Not that the other program didn't offer that type of thing, but we certainly want all of these issues that have been given to us as, hey, we need help with that, honored and front and center. That's what's the most important there.
Awesome. Oh, I'm just blown away. The extra consideration that we're doing. I didn't know all of that. So that's amazing. Thank you. Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
we're leaning into their lived experience, which I think
Yes.
is really
Yes.
important.
Yes, which is amazing. What kind of impact do you hope Boundaries and Beyond will have on the individuals in the communities?
Oh, nothing but positive ones, that's for sure. I think for me personally, and again, this is for me for them whenever I say for me for them. And that's a very varied thing. I will selfishly say for myself in particular, I don't think people appreciate and understand how much of a safety thing this is. How much of a disservice it is by guardians and parents to decide for another human being that they simply are not, will not, should not. And to me, honestly, and I'm going to be divisive here, it's abusive. It's very abusive to not educate people in a way that impacts and can impact and create a victimization of them because you don't want to talk to your person about sex. So for me, it is very much safety driven. And also, I'm a sex educator. Sex is amazing. It's healing. It's, oh my gosh, it's so many things that we all need in our life. And so I want to be the person that listens and puts into their needs. And I want to help them have this amazing life that I have had. It's akin to, oh, marriage is just between a man and a woman. Oh, that's funny because I've been married 3 times. So does that count as the sanctity of marriage there? Because I have the freedom as a white woman and I'm bi. I could go do any of that stuff. Most of our clientele aren't even inspired to have friendships. They're not inspired to have romantic platonic relationships. Do you know how many romantic platonic relationships I have? 3. They're all women. It doesn't mean that I have to have sex with them, but we're certainly romantic in our relationships. We're certainly a partner in every sense of the way. We might just not have sex. And why shouldn't everybody be able to have that and understand that's okay? There are so many individuals that are coming to us and saying that we just want to hold hands with people. We just want hugs. I think sex is too much. But if I'm basing my opinion on my own and I'm like, no, you shouldn't know any of this. So they shouldn't even be supported by holding hands. That is intimacy. Intimacy is so integral to a healthy life, mentally, emotionally, physically. So that's what I want to do. That's what I want to impart. I want to give them those tools. I want to give them the boundaries. I want to do it as a safety thing, and safety as in a mental, emotional, and physical safety way, because all 3 are equally as important. If you ask me, I'm going to get off my soapbox.
It's not a soapbox. I think it's accurate. It reflects, I think, how Sarah and I feel as well. Intimacy, relationships, connection is a human right. And when you said it's abusive, I agree. It's a form of neglect.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just food, medicine, right? Like, we are social creatures. We have only evolved to be where we are because we are social creatures and we've had relationships with other people. People may not want to think that. We all want to think that we're super hyper independent sometimes, but we evolved to be social creatures and we need each other and we need connection for our minds and our bodies to flourish. And a lot of the folks in the disability community are very isolated from other people. which is a
I think
huge
so.
disservice to them. And so that's kind of part of where the Beyond Ball came from, is that there's a huge need to be in connection with other people in person. That's part of that. I think impact wise, like Jenna said, the safety aspect, of course, that's really important. But I'd also really want to see people being armed with the things they need to be their authentic selves, to live a fulfilling life in whatever way that works for them, and being able to communicate their needs and their wants and their boundaries. That's the first thing we're going to start talking about. We're going to talk about emotional regulation and communication. Those are basics. Doesn't even necessarily have to be like romantic relationships. It could be with caregivers. It could be with the teacher, whatever. They're just basic skills that truly most people aren't great at anyways. This is not just for people with IDD. This was probably should have been included in our sex ed, but was not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Preach.
I also think it's really important that we're doing the focus groups. I have done lots of work with vulnerable communities in various forms. And the number one across the board, every single time, what do they want? To be seen and heard. That's it, to be seen and heard. And we're doing that, and we're going a step further. We're implementing their suggestions. We're going to address their needs.
You're right. I think about all the stuff that I should have learned in my sex ed class and all the stuff that even I was exposed to. How long did it take me to feel safe? How long did it take me to feel confident, even not even 100% confident on my sexuality? It just blows me away when I think about I was diagnosed ADHD this year. Not that it changed my life anything other than now I have a title. Okay, fine, whatever. Maybe take a pill here and there if I want to. But the reality is that I'm working with this brain that I was given and my insecurities and all this stuff and developing who I am. Can you imagine if I had another layer, just one more layer, one more something involved, maybe the ability of not being able to talk or hear clearly, or just, I can't imagine. I just can't imagine the extra layer, that how much more difficult it would be. And it hurts my heart. Do you think with all that we're talking about that we're going to be teaching how to help them be self-advocates about their own sexuality and giving them the tools to be safe? Do you think this is possible?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. Self-advocacy and peer-to-peer training are a huge part. And that's simply because who doesn't need extra time to get comfortable with new tools? And I think it's so important to be taught from somebody that shares your own struggles instead of having just able-bodied white women talking at you about stuff. Why not have your own community? I think it also then lends to the draw of safety and like people being interested. It's not just like, oh, we're going to have these two people talk at us. It is really an involved then conversation. And it's extra time to learn and practice these tools before venturing out. You're in a very safe box, a very safe container, I will say, to practice these tools and to have immediate input into either, hey, I did this tool, this doesn't work for me. Can we come up with a different way? Right? Amazing. Or B, I practiced this tool and now I'm learning to have it as muscle memory. So when I go out into the community at large or the world at large, I now have these additional things that I can keep myself safe with. And you don't want that to come from outside of the community all the time. It would be like it'd be like me giving like a racism speech to a community of people of color. I'm going to have a very limited ability to show up in the way that would be correct or appropriate. I'm only speaking from my privileged side because I don't have to deal with these things. Whereas when you are truly peer to peer, and I'm not just talking about race or gender or creed or any of those things, when you are actually learning and trying to better yourself, and it is around something that is such a human basic need, I think it's so important that you have your community as a part of it. So yeah, we have peer-to-peer trainings. Every single lesson plan that we have a peer-to-peer activity so that our students have the time to also understand that what their limitations or abilities are doesn't mean that the person across to you has the same abilities. So it's even a greater lesson of, oh, I might be verbal and I might be speaking to somebody who is not able to communicate that way. And so I now need to adjust how I am showing it for myself or for them. So it's a massively beneficial tool for anybody.
Yeah, so Jenna has mentioned two aspects of our program that are important. One is we're going to be training other folks from the IDD community to be peer facilitators. So essentially, they will teach with us. We're never going to just be like, cool, you go teach the program, peace out, figure out any problems on your own. We'll be there. We'll be there supporting them. And it's not like they're going to be teaching every second of it. And they can always bow out at any time while they're teaching because we'll be there. But so we're going to have what we call peer facilitators helping teach with us, or co-teachers, if you will. And then Jenna mentioned the peer-to-peer activities where they're actually working in groups or having discussions or participating in activity together. Data, science, research tells us that learning from peers is more impactful, and it makes complete sense, right? If I was trying to counsel someone who had an addiction, it wouldn't go great. I don't have an addiction. I have an experience that I don't have tips and tricks to help with. But peer facilitators or other working with your peers, they're going to say, oh, this worked for me when I was struggling with this, and so on. There's so much wisdom and lived experience that has generally not been supported or lifted up in the way that it should be.
Yeah, I have a sister. She's a kidney transplant survivor.
Mm-hmm.
And going through all those things with her for years and years, and all the frustrations and all the hurt and anger and scaredness and everything, I used to tell her, I can only hear you. I can never understand. I can never truly understand because I've never been a kidney transplant needer, right? And so it's the same thing. We can hear, but we can't understand necessarily where they're coming from, where anybody's coming from, if we haven't then experienced it ourselves. And I just think it's such an incredible empowerment tool in a population that feels so scared all the time for themselves.
Just so disempowered regularly.
Yes. Yeah.
We do need some support from y'all to keep this going and to make the kind of impacts that we want to, which is a big impact. We have big dreams, big goals, and we need some support to do that. And we need support from people with IDD. We want to hear, we're talking to them, we're doing focus groups, we're doing interviews, we've got surveys. You can find all this stuff on our website, which is boundariesandbeyond.org. You can also, I think you guys have your emails up somewhere, right? For Orgasmic Terrorists.
Oh, yeah.
Email Jenna, email Sarah, whatever, if you're interested. We need parents and guardians, people with IDD, and service providers for folks with IDD. We need to talk to you. We need to hear from you. We need your feedback. It is so valuable as we're shaping this curriculum.
I want to also add that we need diversity.
Yeah, we do.
Diversity in this. So LGBTQIAS2+, I'll say it for both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please, we need input from you. We need input from people of color. We need input from differing abilities people. We need to help better service this population.
As much as we can. The feedback we've already got is amazing. And I've already made modifications and changes to the curriculum based on that. And you all are who we're serving. We're also going to be making training for parents and for providers, service providers. So that's part of why it's really important for us to hear from you all too. What do you need to support your individuals in your life that have IDD, that need the sex and relationship information and education? And I don't know how Sarah feels about this, but money's always helpful.
Yeah, money's helpful. Please send money. We would love to use some money to bank account. No, I'm just kidding. No, we do need money. And it's not so much that we're looking to make rich. We're looking to spread it. We're looking to grow this across the United States eventually, because it's not just Oregon right now.
Yeah.
This needs to get out there across the states, and that is not easy. We'd also like anybody that's willing to help. I'm all for having somebody come on and wants to volunteer and help us create a better website or improve maybe the classroom approach, because we are going to do it online to keep it simple, but there might be another way of doing it. I'm always open. So that's me. How about you two? What do you think?
I just want to say one more thing. So Heather is discussing right now the need for our focus group attendees.
Right.
I want to make sure that everybody understands that if you participate in this focus group, that it will be maintained confidential. We do record the meetings. We ask to record the meetings, and that's just for Heather and I's brains that are taking in so much information that we can go back and get our data subsets and stuff out of that. Your face will never be shown. Your name will never be shared. You will be protected in this. So if any of those reasons would be reasons that you didn't want to show up, I want to dispel them right now. Your safety and your confidentiality is held in the highest esteem and very important to us. So don't let any reason to not come and attend these focus groups. Please let us know that if you do that you heard us on the podcast or where you heard it from. We'll have a link to all of our other stuff too in the show notes for this one, I believe, Sarah, right?
Yes.
We could put the survey links right in there so you can go right to that. Just let us know where you heard from us and that we're doing what you guys think we should be doing. And if you have more information and you want us to focus on other stuff, Heather and I will happily take any concerns or any things that are important to you. And we will try and add that to the curriculum for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're not sure you want to help, you're like, I'm not really sure how, get in touch. We can chat.
Absolutely.
And here's another thing. Share this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And share our links and share our everything. It's so important. It's such a small movement right now. And we just really need it to become a larger one. So it's like that thing where you see this thing that you can donate and it's, I only have $1. Every dollar helps. Every input here helps. Every share of the links help. Everything that is even a thought towards us and then a small action forward helps. So please don't not just because you think that it won't be beneficial. Trust me, everything is beneficial when it adds up.
Yeah, I agree.
Great. So with that, we're going to tell everybody to go be good humans.
Good humans, guys. Thank you, Heather, so much for showing up. Thank you, Sarah, for being the inspiration behind all this stuff and the facilitator. And the rest of you go be good humans, and I will try my best this week.
I try every week. I sometimes succeed.
That's us being human.
That's true. Messy little ones that we are.
Yep.
Hi, guys. Thanks for listening and supporting our podcast. You can listen to us on Spotify and iTunes, and of course, on our website at orgasmicterrorist.com. Please don't forget to help us out by sharing our podcast and leaving a 5-star review. As always, you can send us an email with your questions and comments to orgasmicterrorist@gmail.com.